Cool. All right, so as David said, my name is Jean-Denis, and I'm an engineering manager for actually growth and engagement at Dropbox. We combine the two, which is a little bit not standard. So this is generally a longer talk, and I'm really going to try to speed it up and try to boil it down to actionable advice for smaller companies. But the slides sort of speak of themselves, so hopefully you can get value out of just reading them after this. So the first thing that I want to focus on is just what does it mean to work on growth? And there's two ways you can define it. One, it's about product, or it's about process. And obviously, it's actually about both. So if you're like focusing on product, right, you're going to have this large funnel. So like pro tip number one, if you don't have the retention part of this, you shouldn't even think about growth. It really doesn't make any sense. If you're not getting retention, right, you're still hopefully getting a couple of users to sign up for your app. This is in the SaaS context. If they stop using it, what you do is you email them and you say, hey, can I talk to you on the phone about why you stopped using my app? And you do that until you can't actually scale that anymore. And once you can't scale, like calling the people who churn, you know you're big enough where you can start to automate things. So that takes care of the retention. Everything else here is way too much for, at any stage, even a large company like Dropbox, to have all of this working at once. So what we do at Dropbox is we focus on just one of these areas. We look at the one that's the most efficient in the funnel, and then we try to fix it over 2 to 3 months, right? And when you're small, you should just be like, okay, we don't have onboarding. That seems to be the place where we can have the biggest uplift. Like, let's focus on it. That's like a product-based approach. The second way to think about it is there's nothing imaginative about growth, right? It's just about being data-driven about things that a lot of other companies have done. So if you want to know everything that I know about growth onboarding, you should basically sign up for 20 services online, right? You should write in a document, take screenshots of every screen they show you. You should take screenshots of every email they sent you. It'll take a week of your life, but at the end of that, you'll understand the entire landscape of what growth is about, right? And once you've done that, all you need to do is apply a data-driven approach where you like do a crappy version of onboarding or a crappy version of some kind of virality flow, right? You see if it moves the needles more than 25%. And if it does, then you actually start thinking about like what would be like a more optimized, nicer looking version of that. And that's the only thing you should do. I mean, you could leave now, and there's nothing in this presentation that you won't get out of doing that. I'm going to skip some slides. I'm going to skip this one. It's hard to get the balance between like a very product-y, intuitive kind of way to build things and a very data-driven thing. If you're fully data-driven, you're going to be stuck in probably local maxima. If you're doing everything with a very design focus first, you might not end up, you're not looking at the numbers generally until it's too late. And it takes a lot of resources to be designed first. So we got this wrong a number of times at Dropbox. I don't even think we have it totally right today. It's like a constant struggle. I think the last talk was really, really good when he said everyone on your team should think about growth, because that means everyone on your team is thinking in a data-driven manner at least some of the time. And that can drive like really good results everywhere. But frankly, I think it's very difficult to do. So my definition of growth is that it's about a fundamental human problem, which is people have no fucking idea what your app does, and they don't care about it, right? And what you have to do is you have to first get them excited about the promise of how their life will be better if they use your app. And then number two, you have to explain to them how to actually use the app to get that promise. That's it. That's the fundamental problem that all growth teams have to deal with. All right, that's the definition stuff. Now some like practical advice. A lot of companies, like young companies that I speak to, don't focus enough on this idea of activation. Activation is, there's a certain number of actions that if your users take within maybe a few days of signing up, have really high causation with long-term engagement. You need to know what those things are, right? I'm not talking correlation, it's causation, because it needs to be something that you can force the user to do that has an effect on their longer-term engagement. And I'll speak in a few slides about how you get to that. But a lot of people treat it as acquisitions, like people who go to my homepage. Activation for them is people who sign up. Signing up doesn't mean anything. It's people who sign up and do something that gets them to stay on your platform for like at least a few weeks so that you can keep convincing them to come back again and again and again. So at Dropbox, there's a few actions. If we can get users to take them, like in the business context, can't tell you what they are, but if they take them, they're literally like 3x more likely to be engaged 6 months down the line. And this happens within the first 7 days, right? And it's causation. So if we force them to do it, we get the 4x 6 months down the line. And then another thing about definition that I think is important to think about is that there are two kinds of virality. There's a virality that drives growth, which is when an existing user brings in a non-user. And then there's virality around engagement, which is when an existing user brings back other existing users. And in terms of features, these things are quite different. So like at mentions would generally be like in the second category. Generally, you can only at mention someone who's already on the platform. But like a Facebook like, so if you have Facebook, like if someone who's using your app can Facebook like it, that's going to be more in the first category. I'm going to get to actionable advice, but just when you're thinking about product, it's good to keep these two things as separate because you ideally want both. If you just get the bottom one, you'll have high engagement but no growth. If you only get the top one, you'll have high growth but low engagement. So metrics. So I actually think the statistical aspect of A/B testing is really tough at small scale. I mean, I have trouble with statistical significance, like our whole team does, and we are experimenting on hundreds of thousands of daily exposures. And I think generally, I would focus only on experiments that are going to have a huge yield. Don't worry about things that'll do 5%. That doesn't matter until you're at such a scale that you have a bunch of people worrying about growth. So things to be wary of. I don't like active users. I don't like it because first it's about users, right? So for a lot of products, there's a great logged out experience, and those aren't users. Those are just like sessions. So don't get hung up on the word user. The second one is active. Active is a loaded word. What does it mean to be active? So be really specific. Like on my platform, there's 8 actions that people can take. So you actually have 8 kinds of active users. People maybe only do action A or only action B. So for Dropbox, some people only use it to sync files across devices. Other people use it as backup. Other people use it as photos. Some people use it for all of these things. As soon as we sort of split up the different kind of users, it made it much easier to say like, oh, wait a second. Our onboarding is only resulting in backup users. So we're being really bad at explaining to people how you share on Dropbox, right? Or onboarding is leading to people like only uploading photos. Maybe they don't even understand that they can like put Word documents in there and collaborate. So until we had sort of metrics that were like closer to all the different use cases that we cared about, we weren't able to like really tweak the product experience in a good way. And then again, the activation thing that I said before, that actually might be a typo. It might be 10 friends in 7 days, 7 friends in 10 days, who knows? The point is there's some activity that for your product, if you can get people to do it early, it'll be good in the long term. So here's how you figure it out. First, you come to some metrics that are the major 4 or 5 actions that people can do in your app, okay? Step 1. Number 2, you have some kind of cohort analysis that looks at how engaged people stay over time. And if you can't wait 6 months, do it over like 2 to 3 months, okay? Look at what correlates highly. Correlation is not causation, but you see what correlates highly. So you see, oh, if people do this in the first few days, then they're very engaged 2 months down the line. And then what you do is you create an onboarding experience that forces the people to do the action, and you wait another 2 to 3 months, and you see if you have causation. I mean, it's stupid, right? But like, you're talking to users is not going to give you the answer. The only way you're going to get the answer is if you test it. If anyone asks me a question after this talk, like, would you do A or B? I'm just going to say, I have no idea. None of the experiences that I have at Dropbox will apply to your companies. Everyone is different, so test, test, test. All right, I'm going to run out of time. We're not going to cover that. Revisit your metrics. I'm making up all the numbers here, but there are 2 ways to share on Dropbox. 18 months ago, one was 4 times as good as the other, okay? Today, the difference is 2x in the other direction. We haven't really changed any of the product experience. It's just the way people use the product changes over time. We were making product decisions based on the fact that A was better than B. But sometimes in the last 18 months, it changed, and we didn't realize it until a few months later. And it turned out that we should have changed the way we make all our product decisions, maybe to emphasize the way of sharing that people like more and it has more virality. Like things, the ground changes under you all the time. And if you're not paying attention, if you're doing analysis, coming up with conclusions, and then running with the conclusions without ever turning around, you're going to be in trouble. Also, if you do big tests, have a control group that stays over time, like maintain the control group for maybe a year to make sure there isn't some weird regression down the line that you didn't take into account. All right, software as a service or money as a service. Growth should generally not look at metrics through the paying event. You're better off just having one team focus on growing your user base and another one focus on getting people to pay. In the worst case, if you're like adding a lot of free users that are costing you a lot of money, because you've really figured out growth and you haven't figured out monetization, well, either you'll get acqui-hired or you can just turn off the funnel part of the growth and then worry about the monetization. If you make the mistake of tying your existing business model to growth, you might just basically stunt your own growth because you're worried about bringing in users that are going to cost you too much. That seems like weird, but actually companies do that all the time. They just look at their funnel through the money as opposed to looking at the funnel through like activity that matters. And then skipping. I think this is important, and I really liked IWE's presentation, but first of all, A/B tests don't tell you what users think. All you know is that you change something and they click on something. You could have changed the copy to talk about their parents, and you're like, oh, they like clicking on things because they like their parents. I'll talk about parents everywhere. You don't know that. All you know is that you added the word parents, and for some reason that you don't understand, right? People now like when they see parents to click on that button. If you want to somewhat understand your users, you can do user research, but again, you will never understand your users. You will just have like statistical evidence about things that are likely to make other things. User research is good to sort of prime experiments, to sort of suggest to you what you should work on. It's not really great to like figure out the ideal product. There's a great Simpsons episode where like Homer is asked to design a car, and he designs this like disgusting car, but he's the average American. So, actionable advice. Homer is not the average American, but the point is Homer is not the right person. The average user that you ask questions about your product is not the right person to tell you what to do. So things that are very hard, reactivating dormant users. One, it's hard, and two, it's not very smart. Like Dropbox is very large. We have probably tens of millions of dormant users, but we're trying to get to 1 billion users. So like activating that 10 million users is really not gonna get us anywhere. Button colors or like fixing your forms, it makes me cringe. Like just look at the good forms that a company like LinkedIn has done for payments. Just copy 90% of that, and then you don't ever have to worry about button colors. Button colors will never take a company that is failing to a company that's a huge success, right? So think big. Things that matter, going from not doing anything to doing it. You don't have an onboarding experience? Buy the book from the guy 2 presentations ago. I've actually like looked at it. It's good. Create an onboarding experience. You're not sending email reminders to people to get them back into your platforms. Like, I'm not talking about drip campaigns. I'm saying they do an action on your platform, like invite others. And then their friends join the platform. You should email the first person and say, like, hey, the people that you invited to collaborate with you have now joined. Maybe you now want to send content to them, you know? Just work on trying these things out. Once again, all you have to do is look at what everyone else does, memorize it, test it. Once you've tested a bit of everything and you've got some channels that are working for you, it's better to focus on making those channels awesome, general rule, not always true, than it is on trying to make a channel that's not working and making it great. So recently there was an article by LinkedIn that was going around about, I think, whether they were going to optimize their homepage or their email campaigns. And it turned out that their homepage was great, and they'd been focusing on the email campaigns because they thought they could get that up. But then they went back to the homepage and they were able to get like another like double % lift just from focusing on that because it was already going really well. And at Dropbox, we found this to be true. I mean, we always think there's going to be like a hack, like a thing that we haven't tried that's going to, you know, propel us even further. And the truth is, the things that we're doing now, like there are always ways that we can make them better in double-digit ways. I'm going to skip these slides, I think. So I have a bunch of templates for virality, but there's nothing new there. The only thing that's actually people don't realize is partnerships are super important, but it's probably too late for a lot of you. Like later in your careers, partnerships are weird because engineers don't like partnerships. Engineers don't like sales, and we don't like partnerships. Like we don't like talking to people and having it's complicated, right? We want it to be automatic. It's all self-serve. People give me credit cards. But if you look at, I don't like people at all. But Chrome is an interesting example, right? Like I think of Chrome as something that I use because it was the cool thing when I was in grad school and we're all using Chrome and blah, blah, blah. But Chrome has like partnership deals for distribution with companies like Adobe, right? Where like it just asks you to like download Chrome here and there. And that's how you get from maybe like 10 million to hundreds of millions. I think it's no secret that like companies like Dropbox have deals with like Samsung, right? And that obviously drives growth for us. I mean, you know, there's Samsung, there's like hundreds of millions of Samsung phones, right, that come with Dropbox on them. Obviously, we have a ton of growth that's just organic, but you can't say no to these avenues. And I don't know when in your startup's history that becomes important, but I think it's earlier than most people think. So how am I doing on time? Oh, yeah, great, okay. So this is something that I really like. I call it progressive engagement. One way to think about growth is, so if you care about signups growth, this isn't gonna help. But if you have a really good metric for activity, if you have something that's like, this activity is great, and if people do it, they're 30% likely to give me money, right? The question of growth is not necessarily like, how do you get new signups? It's more, how do you take people who use your product once a month or once a week, and how do you drive them to that like one activity stream that has a ton of value? So there's two kinds of like sort of progressive engagement. You can think about it over time. So get people who use Dropbox for backup, and they seem to only like copy files for backup once a month, and get them to do it once a week, right? Or get them to do maybe even like once a day, where it's no longer backup. Maybe it's a sync use case. That's activity. Get people to do things more and more and more. The second thing you can do is like get more quality, right? So that's about like continuously educating existing users who are sort of hooked to your product, and getting them to do like high quality actions. And I think like drip marketing, right, is a clear way that people go about that. I think there's a lot of room to be played around like wizards or like tooltips, not just for new users, but for users that have been engaged for a while. And there's actually a pretty cool, I think, trick that you can use, which is an Optin Beta idea. You might tell people something like, oh, we have a new version of sharing that's out. Do you want to opt into it, right? And you send them an email. And in their head, it's like, oh, it's a beta, it's opt-in, maybe only I got the email, it's cool, they'll sign up for it. If they don't click the email, you can still give them the feature, right? So it's just another way to launch features. But what happens when you tell people that it's opt-in and it's a beta, they'll be like more naturally engaged with a feature. So that's been pretty good. Yeah, reminders, whatever, re-engagement. It's pretty straightforward. I want to talk a little bit about business, about monetization, and about freemium. So I don't know who noticed this, but it used to be Basecamp used to have a free plan, and they don't anymore. Now it's like a 60-day trial. And I think this is really important when you're in SaaS, is to understand how free gets to paying, and where in your funnel you actually ask to get people's credit card information. So I have spoken to someone at Basecamp, but I don't know much about their internal decision making, but my guess is like free wasn't working out for them. And for Dropbox, you can think of free as very costly, right? It's a lot of people with space that we're never going to monetize, ever, right? Some of them are going to stay free forever. There's definitely a large percentage of users that will never monetize. So maybe we should be doing 60-day trials for Dropbox, right? And we've gone through that decision making, and we figured out which one of the two is better. The advantage of trials is that people will be more engaged naturally. They feel like they have a finite amount of time to try something, and that gets them more engaged, right? So that's one thing we're thinking about. And then if you do trials, the big question is whether you ask for credit card information top of funnel. So in order to start your trial, you get the credit card, or whether you ask for it like 30 days in or 60 days in. So obviously, the credit card is gonna like kill the number of people who sign up for the product, but you should definitely test both. Like make sure to run that test. It depends on how convinced you are that you can get people hooked on something in 30 to 60 days. But the thing is, if you ask for the credit card first, they're more likely to be more engaged than if you ask for it later. All right? Like someone who signs up and gives the credit card, they've gone through a mental leap, which is like, oh, I'm actually okay with these people having my credit card. I'm gonna make more of an effort to use the platform. So I don't know what else there is. Oh, does this not work? Oh, gating freemium, don't want to talk about that. Parting advice. Every company is different. I feel very strongly about this. I don't think you can take what worked for us and make it work for you. Be wary of learning from, so I said before you should look at all these companies. That's get an idea of everything that's possible, but it doesn't mean it all works. So things about Dropbox. We have not optimized our homepage for conversion. We've like optimized it for things like trust and like values, right? That's the truth. We are not A/B testing that page for conversion. We're also, Dropbox is going really well in so many ways that we're not optimizing a bunch of areas of our funnel that you guys probably care about. So it's better to just observe from far away, do your own experiments, learn your own lessons. Good luck. Get growth advisors. I really think there's no competitive advantage to growth at all. When I went to talk to people at like LinkedIn or other companies, they were very, very open. I'm going to try to be as open. If some of you can guess my email address, it shouldn't be too difficult. And you send me an email and you ask some like specific questions, I'll try to advise. But like really get a couple people who've done it before, ask questions, get answers, do a lot of testing, and hopefully you can figure it out. That's it.